I'm going to tell you a story, paint you a picture, ask you to think differently about who you are, about who we are.
The story I'm going to tell is a story of a generation, my generation.
It's a tale of our romance with the past, the losses of our age, and hope for the future.
There is a memory of an old Sudan, a torn and faded picture of the country as it was told to us, a warm and beautiful place imprinted in our memories as if it were our own, a world of wide open boulevards and tree-lined streets, of clean roads and white robes.
Young men straight and proud, and women wrapped in gold and finery. Old men on bicycles gliding slowly through the town. The early morning sirens, and those trains that ran on time. Cinema Coliseum, St. James, and jazz nights by the Nile.
Khartoum University in its glory days, when exams were marked in London and students had their laundry done. Greek stores full of foreign goods, and cars when England used to make them. Weddings that lasted 40 days and 40 nights, and funerals that lasted just as long.
Clear skies, cool nights, and darkness pierced by the brightest stars. Lush green gardens and seasons that broke the heat. Young men and women full of passion and idealism. An old world that is tired and in retreat, and a new world, resurgent and full of hope.
These are the stories that our fathers told us, told to us in sketches, fragments, told to us in the early mornings as the sun crept slowly into the sky. On those orange days, afternoons when the heat and the dust would rise in a blazing haze, swallowing the earth and all that was on it, and we would listen, rapt.
As they told us of the golden age, the age of charismatics, of Che, Nukrum and Neriri, of revolution and a new world born, of the brave men and brave women who fought for independence, and of the generation that followed.
Their generation, the generation that left to Paris, London, Moscow, Belgrade, Budapest, and then returned, refusing the foreign passports and the foreign jobs, returned to build their country. Masters of the West and children of the East, products of the Khalwa and the grander schools in Europe, fired by visions of grandeur and destiny.
And in the evenings, when the earth began to cool and the crickets make their song, they would gather together at one another's homes and talk of politics and worldly matters, and we would sit in amongst them, looking on with awe and envy.
Awe at all that they had done, envy of the world that was once theirs, wishing we had lived in what seemed like a simpler, more dignified, more passionate age, when the country was clean and ordered and Sudan was on the rise.
When education was free and universities world-class, when high schools were stocked full of books and standards were non-negotiable. Told elsewhere, this story could be dismissed as little more than the reverence of the young towards the old.
And that is part of it, for sure. But it is more than that. For ours is a culture that venerates the past. Yesterday is always better than today, the old better than the new.
And so it's a tale of our romance with another age. Romance fired by stories of those who were once there, who never cease to remind us of the glory that once was, by virtue of their achievements and the respect that we show them. For how could we not feel this way when our world was so different?
Our world, the world that we grew up in, was crumbling. It was a world of broken roads and shattered sidewalks, of tired buildings, cracked walls and feeling pain.
And the sand that gathered on the sides of the roads, it was the silence of downtown Khartoum, the shuttered shops, the falling standards.
It was the universities in disrepair, public gardens turned to dust, the long lines for bread and fuel, We learned our science out of books, sketching experiments on pieces of paper.
Rode on buses that tilted sideways by the sheer number of their passengers. Those of us with the energy hang loosely on the outside, one arm around the bar that cuts across the bus window, foot and ridge just above the tire.
Cinema Coliseum became a place they went to for a fight. St. James, we only heard of. Our weddings were shorter, but sometimes shared. Our funerals too.
This time, those of us that left took the foreign passports and the foreign jobs. We traveled to Europe, North America, the Middle East, and Asia. We went to the grand universities and the not so grand ones. Took jobs where we could.
Some of us were lucky, others were not. Some of us returned, many did not. Ours was an age without heroes, it seemed.
We had no Ches, no Nyereres, no Nasirs. Revolution was something that happened to us, not by us. Our dreams were simpler. A job, perhaps a marriage, our own house if we dared hope. In place of fire and idealism, pragmatism.
And so it was that we felt a sense of having fallen short, that we were not what we should have been, and had inherited a country that was not what it could have been, and that somehow it was our fault.
But here's the thing. It wasn't. It isn't.
It is true that we have not lived the lives of the previous generation. It is true that Sudan is not what they dreamt it to be. But so be it. It's not for one generation to copy another, but to stand upon its shoulders.
We have seen Sudan through some of its most difficult times, and seen other changes too. From the high-rise buildings that now shape the capital, to the jagged borders that now mark the southern limits of the country.
We live in a different world, with different challenges and different opportunities. We live in a world where countries like China and Brazil are challenging the old order, where a black man is the president of the United States, and the internet has the power to connect us all.
We must look at the past with honesty and do the same with the present. The golden age was not so golden, we know this. And ours was not so dark, we know this too. We must learn to face the world as it is and not as we wish it to be.
Most of all, we must recognize that our generation is one to be proud of too. You only need to take a look at the people around you to realize this. And there are so many in Sudan, in the Gulf, America, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East.
Young women and men who should make us all stand tall.
Many of whom would have achieved great things despite terrible hardships without the privileges of the Gilded Age.
The civil society activist who dedicates her spare time to teaching young people how to read and write.
The student who's working as a taxi driver to make sure that he still contributes to his family home.
The woman who set up a community college.
The young man who sacrificed his own education so that his brother could study abroad.
The businesswoman who came back to set up a business here in Sudan.
Journalists.
Academics.
Doctors.
Lawyers.
Soldiers.
Politicians.
I could go on.
We must of course respect our past, but we cannot live in shadows. Yesterday need not always be better than tomorrow. Rather than lament what has been lost, it is time to take stock of what we have. And though Sudan may not be the country that our parents dreamt it to be,
it remains a place with great promise. For this Sudan, the country that quietly joined the ranks of nations in July 2011, is rich in people, heritage, land, and resources. Out of the 39 million that made up the old Sudan, at least 30 million remain with us today.
Amongst their numbers are Arabs,
Africans,
Christians, Muslims,
Arabs,
black, white,
and brown. It's a diversity bound by marriage and memory, faith and language.
Powered by roads and mobile phones, by trade and urbanization.
Cities in which for the first time in history, all of Sudan can be seen.
A land where ancient civilizations flourished and died and grew again, carrying with them tales of greatness and tragedy and the wisdom that they bring. It is in Sudan, where the Middle East meets the African continent, that the White Nile meets the blue, and the Red Sea cuts its swathe.
The influence of its neighbors spilling over its borders in the form of culture, language, and tribe.
A country still rich in resources, vast lands, flat and fertile, anxious for seed and the tiller's hand, oil, gold, uranium, and hydropower, access to the sea and the wealth that lies beyond.
But most of all, its people, able and eager, desperate for a chance to build a better life. For Sudan is a place where education is revered, knowledge pursued, where young women and men clamor to learn, despite the challenges they face, where people are willing to sacrifice for something greater than themselves.
And in this new country lies the possibility of redemption, an original sin requited, the separation of the South, a payment on the road towards mutual dignity and shared prosperity. This
is my Sudan.
Your Sudan.
Your Sudan.
Your Sudan.
Our Sudan.
Our Sudan.
We must respect the past without being bound by it, accept the present without succumbing to it, and dream of a future built upon both.
It's time to dream a new dream, the dream of our generation. The future is not a matter of what will be, but what could be.
It is a choice, and it is ours to make.